Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 51 of Beyond the Blade here on the Hockey Writers podcast channel and also now on the Grandstand Sports Network. I am your co-host, Chad DeDominicis, and I am the lead writer at the Hockey Writers for the Buffalo Sabres and contributing writer for the fourth period.
I'm your other co-host, Bill Schake, and Chad, it is time for Vegas.
Yes, it is
Vegas, baby.
Vegas time. That's right. It is finally here. We've talked about it for, I don't know, year and a half now, basically. How many ideas and thoughts and all of this fun stuff. And finally here it is. We have protected lists. We have players who are available. And go time.
How lucky McPhee is to have the job he currently does.
Yes. He's going to have, I think last time I heard, he's going to have 28 of the 30 first-round picks this year.
I told you it should have been in Vegas. I don't know why they did Chicago. I mean, he's going to be making all the picks anyway, so.
You had to put him a chair on the podium. We can just sit up there and make it.
So do you think he kind of like sits down and goes back up, or does he just go picks 20 through 23 and just like kind of rattles them off?
Kind of. What did Boston do? Boston just rattle them off, didn't they? Or no, they won't. They'll pick one. They'll have the guy come up, take a picture, pick the next one.
Yeah, because it's the first round.
Yep.
That's why.
Yep, that makes sense. That's a good point.
Also, just a side note, McPhee is probably the least excited sounding person when talking about the most exciting job probably in sports.
He really is. From standing next to him at the combine, first thing about McPhee, he's actually kind of short. I'm 5'9", he's shorter than me, so I'd say he probably rooms in about 5'7". But yeah, he has that same, I don't know if I call him monotone, but that same demeanor, I guess tone. I don't think it's monotone, but the same tone in his voice where he never gets too excited about anything. It's just every question is like, yeah, oh yeah. It's just never really anything like, oh man, like he doesn't. I mean, he's not Tim Murray or anything, so like, I guess the best way to put it.
No, but I mean, dude, get a little excited.
Yeah. Well, there was that video of him pumping up his team, saying, "They got the expansion list. Let's go pick some players, boys," or something like that. So that was pretty cool.
All right.
So on today's show, episode 51 here, to quickly recap what we're going to talk about. First things first, we're going to have Nick Guido on from the Hockey Writers who covers the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to talk with him about the Nathan Beaulieu trade, the Sabres' new defenseman. Get his thoughts on that. Also see exactly what's going on in Montreal because that is an extremely interesting team there in Montreal, Bill. Galchenyuk, and they have no defense and no centers right now, and they look like to be headed on the way down, but I guess you never know. But at this point, it doesn't look good for those Montreal fans.
Interesting is one way to put it.
Yeah.
They're something, all right. Interesting is, yeah, it's one way, but they're a team that, I mean, man, Nick had a lot of ifs last year going into last season. And luckily, they at least made the playoffs. They got a lot of work to do if they're going to do it again this season.
Probably going to be a lot more ifs from Nick here in a little bit. Beyond that, we're going to talk, then get into expansion. We're going to first start with the Sabres, go over who they're protected, who's available, what it looks like from a Sabres perspective. A lot of different ways and a few, I don't know, maybe a small little curveball in there from Bodro, but we'll talk about that. And then we'll probably end the show talking about staying on the expansion topic, but then looking at players who are available around the league that are unprotected, some trades that have already rumored that are going to be happening, maybe some ideas or some targets the Sabres can call Vegas about and say, hey, pick this guy, we'll trade you this guy kind of deal. So we'll have that discussion because there are some really, really intriguing players. When we talked about this.
Looking at you, Minnesota.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Minnesota, even Florida. I mean, the Islanders. I mean, there's a lot of players that are like, right, that there's just no way that this guy would be available. I mean, like, I don't know. Did you really think you'd get here and Josh Manson is actually available to be selected? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, we'll get into it. But, yeah, there's a lot of players out there that I would definitely be just checking in at least, seeing what it would take.
Absolutely. So let's get to the Sabre side of things first here, and let's bring in Nick and see what he thinks about Beaulieu and then exactly what's going on in Montreal, even if maybe he doesn't even know what's going on in Montreal, but let's find out here. All right, so with us now we have Nick Guido, who's a contributing writer at the Hockey Writers for the Montreal Canadiens. We've had Nick on before. We brought him in again with the Nathan Beaulieu trade to get his thoughts on Beaulieu exactly what is going on in Montreal, because Bill and I have a lot of questions about that beyond Beaulieu. But Nick, man, thanks for coming on again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
So we'll start with the first question. We talked about Beaulieu kind of ironically at the beginning of last season, but if you can refresh some of our listeners who maybe didn't hear that, what kind of player should the Sabres be expecting to get here?
I think the Sabres are getting an exciting young player. I think the Habs were squeezed by the expansion draft, and Jordy Ben kind of, I guess, unexpectedly outplayed him to the tail end of the season, just by the way of I don't know if it had something to do with Therrien's coaching, changing over to Julian, but Beaulieu was in and out of the lineup as the year went on, and he was actually scratched for their last game of the year in the playoffs. So you could kind of tell from that point on that he was most likely going to be traded before the expansion draft. But I like Beaulieu. He brings a nice offensive element to the back end, and I think the Sabres could really use that, and they're hurting for defensemen, and I think this is a good move for them. Low risk. They only had to pay
It's okay. Just keep going. Cut it out. Just keep going.
wait a sec. Gotta shut it off. I set an alarm to remind myself.
It's okay.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, I think because the Sabres are hurting for defensemen, I think this is a nice low-risk move for them. And to give up only a third-round pick, I think it's a good first move by the new GM, Jason Botterill.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, young guy, low pick, low risk. At the beginning of the last season, though, he started with Weber, then healthy scratch at the end, like you said. You mentioned the coaching change. Anything else that went wrong, or kind of what happened throughout the season?
I honestly think, too, it's stuff off the ice. I think that Beaulieu's the kind of guy that could get caught up in the party scene of Montreal or get caught up in kind of what else Montreal brings. And I think that maybe shifting to Buffalo it would kind of discourage him from doing any kind of crazy extracurriculars that he might get into in Montreal. And Galchenyuk is rumored to have the same issues. It's kind of well known. So it could be a kind of a crazy life for a young player in Montreal, and you just have to learn how to handle it. So I think this will be a nice fresh start for him. He'll refocus, and I think he'll be just fine in Buffalo. So I think we don't know exactly what happened with Therrien players and all that, but I think that probably hurt him a little bit in his development. And it's no secret the Habs aren't that good at developing young players because they really don't have any left. So I think just this fresh start will be good for him, and I think the Sabres should be excited.
So from a Montreal perspective, I guess I probably know your answer. I'm going to ask anyways. I mean, do you think this is a bad trade for Montreal? I mean, his value appeared to be low. We're only getting a third-round pick for a guy that was a first-round pick, albeit 5 years ago. But what's your thoughts from the Montreal side of you on this?
I think the optics are definitely awful. Like you had a couple years back when Jared Tenorti was traded for Victor Bartley and John Scott. You had like that's two first-round defensemen that were basically traded away for Victor Bartley, John Scott, and a third-round pick. It's pretty ridiculous to see how badly the Canadians have developed their young players, and you only have a couple guys that have come out of the system. Rarely any prospects out of the Lefebvre Bergevin era. So it's just, I think it's sad. I think that they hold on to their prospects too long or their players too long until their value just diminishes. And a team like Buffalo can just come in and say, hey, we have a spot for you. Come in here and we'll give you a new opportunity and give you a chance to thrive. So I think optically it looks bad for the Canadians. And I think it's hard to believe that he fell so low that you could only salvage a third-round pick for a potential 4-spot offensive defenseman, a young offensive defenseman at that. So I don't think it was like I get the fact that you needed to unload him or else Vegas would have probably taken him for nothing, but it was a bad spot to trade him now. It should have been, if you knew at this point, it should have been something at the deadline or even in the off season last year if you knew it was going to kind of go down this road. So it didn't look too good for the Canadians.
So speaking of young prospects and Montreal getting rid of them, how do you feel about the Drew and Sergachev trade?
I actually do like it. I think Drouin's gonna bring some much needed offense to the Canadians, and I think Sergachev, Bergevin always says you have to give to get, and you do have to give to get. And I'm actually very surprised he gave what he gave to get Drouin. But essentially, he looks at it as Drouin's still a prospect, so he can kind of get away with explaining that, okay, we traded our top prospect for essentially another prospect, even though he's a couple years older. He still has 6 years of control on him now. So I liked Sergachev. I think he played well at the Memorial Cup. He played well in the second part of the OHL season this year. The first part he kind of struggled a little bit, but that could probably be attributed to his time with the big club and getting adjusted back to Windsor. But I think the trade will benefit both teams. Tampa's looking for a defenseman. They needed to unload an RFA, and the Habs wanted Drouin, and they paid up, and I think it'll be good for both teams. But I'm excited to see what Drouin can bring to the Habs for sure.
So do you think his eyes just get really – I was just going to say, do you think his eyes get really big when he hears who's on the market and he goes, who? And then he just, like, kind of pulls the trigger?
Yeah, I do.
2 years in a row?
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to trade you. I'm not going to trade you.
Yeah.
I'm trading you. So it's really expect the unexpected, as he says, and some ways it'll work out, and some ways it won't. And he hasn't been able to acquire quality top six forwards in his time in Montreal over 5 years. I don't really care what anybody says about that. It's just been Radulov, and that's it. And now he has to sign Radulov. He has a job to do there. So really, you break it down to Drouin and Radulov, and that's about it over 5 years. So he's got a lot of work to do, and we don't know exactly where Drouin's going to play because, as you guys might know, we need two centermen still. So, so I guess we'll just see what happens. He sees an opportunity in that way to get a French Canadian, and he does it. So I mean, I like it for the Canadians, but he's got a lot of work to do.
So speaking of centers, that brings up Alex Galchenyuk here. And I mean, what's the move with him? There's a lot of talk about him being traded last week. Now there's talk that they're back in extension talks. But I mean, I don't know. That's Galchenyuk's the last big piece left. I mean, Nick, they only have one defenseman basically at this point. I mean, what are they going to do here with Galchenyuk? Are they going to try to keep him and play with no defense, or use him for a defenseman?
The problem is with Galchenyuk, you trade him and you just create a hole while you try and fill another hole. But he's your best chip, so you need to find a way to maximize his value if you are going to trade him and somehow get a defenseman and a centerman in some way. I don't like your first round pick. You have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds this year, so he has some ammo there. But I mean, the prospect cupboard is pretty bare as well too, so you have to read that at some point. But I think with Galchenyuk, it's been Therrien, Julian, the U23, the World Cup of Hockey. They've all overlooked Galchenyuk as a centerman. They've overlooked Galchenyuk as one of the true elite young players in the league. So I think it might be more than a coaching thing now. It might be more he kind of has to figure out himself what he is. And the Canadians just really don't have time for that now. And it's not all on him. It's the Canadians have to shoulder some of the load here. Like I said about developing prospects, it's just they don't know how to do it. I don't know what it is, but it's been brutal over the last couple of years. And now it looks like if they obviously didn't trade him, but if they are going to trade him, they might even sign him first and see how that works out. But and see if a deal comes down the pipe maybe in another week or two, and just kind of secure him under contract. But I think if he stays with the Habs, he's got to play center. There's no way he can stick him on the wing. And it might end up being a Drouin Galchenyuk 1-2 center ice if they keep those players. So that would be much better than what it looks like they're going to go into next season as of right now. So,
you think Drouin can play center?
A lot of scouts actually think he can play center because he likes to roam and he's a playmaker more than he is anything else. And he can score, but he likes to deliver the puck. So I honestly think that they might try him at center. And if he has a winger in Radulov or a winger in Pacioretty, you never know what can happen. But I mean, at this point, I don't see how he can get 2 centermen this offseason on top of getting another defenseman. It's just there's too many holes to fill.
So I guess to put a bow on all this, do you have any idea what Marc Bergevin's plan is? Does anyone know what his plan is? Does Bergevin even know what his plan is? I mean, like Bill said, last year was, oh, look, I can get Shea Weber. This year was, oh, look, I can get Jonathan Drouin. And then now you have no defenseman basically. And if Vegas takes a defenseman, then you're even down other defensemen. And your biggest piece is a centerman that you need a center. So if you're moving a defenseman, then you have no centers. And it's like, then he has no prospects in the system. Just seems like this is all snowballing to a January effect, this guy not having a job.
No, absolutely. And this is his last ditch effort to keeping his job. And I've said that for I don't know how long now. This is the year he's got to go all out and figure it out, because Vegas is probably going to take Brandon Davidson, the defenseman they got in the Desharnais trade from Edmonton, or they're taking Charles Hudon, who is a center prospect that's been second and third in AHL scoring the last 2-3 seasons. And Bergevin just hasn't brought him up. And it's left a lot of people thinking, well, what's wrong with this guy? If like he's scoring, and the Habs don't have scoring. But he decides to go get Steve Ott and Dwight King at the deadline and leave Hudon in the minors. So if Vegas picks him up, then your forward prospects are really, really, really shallow. So to answer your question, I don't know if he has a set plan or if he's just going to kind of see how the expansion draft goes and just kind of adjust on the fly, because he really needs to do something to save his job beyond this season. Because really, if let's say they have another first round exit next year, he's not going to have a job, and the Canadians are going to be left with a few options but to blow it up.
I mean, if they go into the season with this roster currently as constructed, even without Radulov, I don't know. I mean, they're, in my opinion, that's not a playoff team. You have no defense.
No, absolutely not.
You have no scoring, and you're painting everything on poor Carey Price back there.
Exactly, and they still haven't figured out that Carey Price doesn't score goals. They haven't figured that out. And it's just they think that he can solve all their problems. And now with Price needing a new contract after next season, it's like, how many teams have won the Cup with a goalie making $8-9 million a year? And he's making what he's making now, and they still have all these holes. So if you add another $2-3 million to his contract, where are you getting this money to sign all these players, to trade for these players? So he better have a plan.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is when you have a goalie making that much, the way you do it is you draft well and you bring up the prospects and they play for cheap. And
that's right.
He hasn't done that either. So
there's really only a few guys that he could call up from the minors that would even entertain third and fourth line roles as of now. And that's how teams do it. Like, look at Pittsburgh. All these guys are making between 600, 900,000 and look at them. So it's just the way the team's constructed it's flawed, and it's just kind of sad it's gotten to this point.
Well, thanks for making us here in Buffalo feel pretty good.
I'm sinking ship up there in Montreal.
At least for this segment, right?
There's trouble elsewhere.
So Nick Guido of the Hockey Writers giving us some insight on the Montreal Canadiens. He's a contributing writer for the Hockey Writers. You can follow him on Twitter at Nick Guido THW. He really knows the stuff about Montreal. He's plugged in pretty well, so I recommend you follow him and check out his stuff on the Hockey Writers. Nick, man, thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll talk him before the season, especially being a guy who covers the division. And I don't know, maybe we'll call you a few times, talk about how Beaulieu doing or how Drouin's doing and how you have no defense up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks,
All right. Well, Nick doesn't appear to really know what's going on in Montreal either.
No, it's I think the Riddler is going to be the new mascot.
Yeah.
But a lot of question marks. I will say this. I mean, the trade, I like it for both teams, for Tampa Bay and Montreal. But I will say, sitting here in Buffalo, I kind of like it too. You're taking Tampa Bay, who's a very high-powered offense, and you had to worry about, Johnson and Stamkos and Drouin, and now you don't have to worry about Drouin. One less guy you kind of worry about in the offense. And Montreal they're a struggling offensive team as it is. So, I mean, Drouin's obviously going to help, but with all the gaps they have, how much is he actually going to help? So, I don't know that I'd hate it, at least from the Sabres standpoint inside the division.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, like we talked about right now, they have Shea Weber, who's I think almost 33 years old, and then behind him is Emelin, and that's really it. To bring Markov back at 37 or whatever old he is. I mean, it is a very old defense that can be taken advantage of with some speedy forwards, especially the Atlantic Division, who is a lot of teams that play with speed. So that does not bode well for Carey Price or Montreal.
Yeah, I'd look for teams like probably Toronto and Tampa Bay to probably go 4-0 against Montreal unless they do something crazy here.
So
they have trouble.
Yeah,
with that speed.
yeah, and that's good things for us. Like I said to Nick, looks like it's a sinking ship up there, and that means there's one more spot available in that playoff top 3. But I don't know if the Sabres are ready for that next year. We'll have to see about that. But beyond that, we'll move into our expansion talk here. So quickly, for those of you who maybe been living under a rock and don't know, the protected list came out yesterday. The Sabres went with the 7-3-1, 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goaltender. The 7 forwards were Ryan O'Reilly, Vander Kane, Tyler Ennis, interesting, Zemgus Girgensons, Johan Larsson, Marcus Foligno, Kyle Okposo. 3 defenders were Risto Linen, McCabe Beaulieu, and then, as expected, the goaltender is Robin Lehner, which left big guys unprotected, like Molson, Bogosian, who were expected, Linus Ullmark, Justin Falk, and maybe the surprise here, Will Carrier, unprotected.
Your boy.
Yeah,
Your boy's left.
Pumped his tires all last year, and then for all now he could be gone.
And now you get to pump his tires all the way to Vegas.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, it's curious. I mean, I guess if you leave all the the big contracts unprotected, Allmark's kind of the easy choice. To that though, I will say they're already taking Fleury. Mrazek was unprotected, which I'm sure we'll get to in segment 3. And I mean, there's other guys like Ranta, and there's quite a few good goalies out there. So I mean, unless Vegas goes crazy and takes more goalies than 3, Allmark is curious. I will say the only way it makes sense is if you basically know Peterson isn't coming. If Allmark goes too, you're looking pretty weak at goalie. But I mean, you got Leonard. So, and I know a few people aren't gonna want to hear that, but he's a young goalie. He's good. He's good. And you got at least, I would imagine, if you do the bridge deal, 2-3 years to figure something out. I don't know. It's curious for me.
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction was, I kind of put on Twitter is, if this is being done to protect Allmark, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I'm trying to think of the right word to say about Allmark, because I'm trying to tread carefully in the water I'm about to dip my toe into. He's a promising prospect. I mean, I'll say that. But there's just things that – and I was really high on him before he came here, when he initially first came here and, got to play NHL games right away. But the thing that concerns me is he hasn't improved on things that struggled in year 1. He still flops all over the place. He's bad at positioning. He overplays the puck. He goes down too early a lot. He's just, sure, he's better side to side than Robin Lehner is. Okay, but he's not as good positionally sound. And, he's a young goaltender. Some goaltenders take a while to mature and understand those things. Just I'm not seeing that improvement. And in AHL, you can get away with that. NHL, people are going to scout that hard and go, we're just going to have this guy overplay the puck all day and have backdoor tap-ins.
Yeah, you just shoot the puck wide.
Right.
The point.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I didn't watch many Rochester Americans games last year. I did catch a couple where they're on MSG. And like you said, I saw points where he's just 5 feet out of the crease. Or he's making a diving save. And like you said, in the AHL, you can get away with it. Maybe the shot goes wide or it gets blocked. But, man, if you're out of position for 5 to 10 seconds, it's going to find a way in the back of the net in the NHL. So, I mean, it has me worried. Again, I guess I can kind of see it just because the prospect's not there. And I think maybe it shows that maybe, 1, that Peterson is definitely not coming. And 2, that maybe the rumors are out there, maybe he just doesn't like Leonard. And if that's the case, I mean, I don't know what he's doing at goalie. I'll say that much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that he keeps Leonard, even though all these rumors are out there. I still think that gets done. I mean,
I don't know how you don't. Like we've been talking about all offseason, is you're just making yourself a bigger problem if you don't.
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't hurt you to go 2-year deal.
And you can always trade him next year.
And exactly. Yeah. It's 1 year. You can trade him. I mean, there are other goalies out there. So, We can get into that, I guess, too, in segment 3. Maybe they go for a guy like Mrazek. I don't know how that works, but
I mean, again, the part of that is you're giving up assets for how much of an improvement? A minimal improvement, maybe, or even the same, or if not, maybe even worse.
Right, yeah. And how much are you getting for Leonard if you move him because you gave him first to get him? I know it wasn't you that did, but the Sabres did as a team. So, it's curious because it goes back to that argument of if you're not getting a guy like Carey Price, how different are they? So I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure here. I will say the thing for Carrier that kind of, I don't want to say upsets me because, he's a third, fourth line guy. But I feel like he would have fit well with what they're trying to do. He's fast. He's big body. He's going to go get the puck, and he's going to play that aggressive hockey. So
he seems like a bottom guy in the bottom 6.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I was kind of, like I said, I was unsure on Carrier. You obviously were high coming out of training camp, and I wasn't quite sure about him. But, I mean, seeing him through the, 40, obviously over 40 games he played, I was excited to see what he would be in a full-time role in, like, the third line. And now we might not be able to see that, which is it's a little disconcerting. And we have other prospects that can come up and play that spot, but I feel like Carrier proved they can do it. I mean, he wasn't putting up as many points as you would have liked, but if you're on a third, fourth role, I mean, how much are you really, wanting to get? I guess the other thing that is not Botterill's fault, but kind of curious is he got hurt at the end of the year. You didn't have to play him those last couple games. You could have avoided this whole thing.
I mean, it's different. Think about that, though. It's a different management group, Tim Murray probably thought he had no idea. He had no plan at all to expose him in expansion. And
True.
Now we have a different general manager here. There's a different feel on it. It's –
well, too. It goes back to maybe what that not gift, but favor was owed.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's still there. I mean, that trade was made with the Sabres. But Guido was here when that Kessler deal was done. So maybe that they still cash that in somehow. And I don't know, maybe that comes in the form of Molson or Bogosian going to Vegas somehow. We don't know. And that could happen outside of the expansion part of it. But on Carrier, I don't want to make a huge deal about, a guy who is a third-line guy. I mean, he's replaceable, sure. But, I mean, he had 5 goals in 41 games. You put that over a full season, that's 10 goals. That's his first season in the NHL. Could he be a 10 to 15 goal guy in your third line? I don't know, maybe, possibly. Those guys don't grow on trees. I mean, he could skate. He showed flashes of skill. I mean, not all the time, but he showed it. He's not afraid to hit, go in the corners. I mean, that's just where I thought he fit as a Botterill third-line guy. I think he's a guy he would have liked to have in Pittsburgh and play the third line or fourth line in Pittsburgh. That's what you need in today's NHL. You need those guys. Everyone used to say a top 6. Well, now it sounds like a top 9 is what today's NHL is. And you need those guys who can play. But is he replaceable? Sure. I mean, you have Baptiste, you have Bailey, but those are 2 guys that right now you would say the way. I mean, you guys want to count Nylander too, but the way that Botterill operates, and those guys are going to start in the minors next year. So now you're already thin at wing. You're talking about moving Evander Kane. You're going to lose Carrier. Like, it starts to build up here. Like, how are you going to replace these guys? I mean, sure, you can go sign Nick Bonino like we talked about a couple of times, but that's a center. That's one guy. I don't know, move Gergenson's the wing, and maybe he stays with Larson. And then, I don't know, am I going to watch Nick Delorier play 60, 70 games again? Am I going to have Matt Molson running on the fourth line? It's just it's frustrating. It's not – I would rather have Carrier here over those guys. And, maybe they really have to protect Allmark, and this was the deal. This was – we're going to we'll lay off Allmark, but we want Carrier. Or maybe – we'll lay off of Allmark, but we want Carrier, and we'll take a second-round pick for Molson or something. I don't know. We don't know what the deal is. We don't
right. Know. Yeah, the last thing for me on Carrier would be that the thing is that he is a third or fourth-line guy, but he has the speed to fill in on a second line if somebody's hurt for
absolutely, yep,
or a couple games. He's
not like Matt Molson where he's not going to be able to keep up with the speed of the game.
Or even Foligno. And, I mean, Foligno's another really good third-line player, but he just doesn't have that speed to keep up with Eichel. And not that Carrier has that speed. No one really does. But, I mean, at least he's gonna be there sooner than a lot of those other guys. So, for me, that's kind of why Carrier going down or potentially being lost could sting a little bit. But, I mean, I will say this. He did talk a lot about development, but I kind of want to raise that question of, even though he brought up that development, I don't know that he's afraid to play young guys. I mean, look at kind of what Pittsburgh
not if
last
they earn
year.
it. Right.
That's what I mean. So I'm just thinking that, like, everyone's assuming now that you have Beaulieu is that Goulet is automatically down next year. And, yeah, it could be the case, and he could just start in the AHL. But if it's Georges or Goulet, am I really, maybe if I'm Housley, who do I want? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's just like, I wonder how much the development factor actually, weighs here, especially guys like Bailey and Baptiste who've played a full year down. Maybe, yeah, if you have the room and you're not, trying to win, I guess, you keep those guys down for another year. But if you're going to be coming in trying to play an aggressive 5-man attack, fast hockey, I don't see how you don't have those guys up.
So the other intriguing part about the unprotection list is Tyler Ennis. Tyler Ennis was protected. I guess maybe you kind of had to protect somebody for not protecting Carrier. Mm-hmm. But do you think this can mean a lot of people expected Ennis to be gone or bought out? Do you think this might mean he actually has a chance to stick around at least another season here?
I mean, I'll say this. For the protection, I think you just had to protect somebody.
Right.
So I think that's kind of why his name is there. But with that being said, I do think it does mean that, maybe he's got a shot. He didn't really get injured last year, and that's obviously the biggest issue. Obviously, he didn't really look like himself for a lot of the season last year.
I mean, he had that groin thing, but flashes. No concussions.
Right. That's what I meant for the most part. So, I mean, he showed flashes of it. So maybe if you're bringing in a guy like Housley and you're playing obviously way more of an Ennis style type of offense, not really like a chip and chase.
Right. North-south game.
Yeah, more of a speed attacking kind of offense. Ennis can fit that. I would say the problem might be that the Tyler Ennis of the good old days, if you will, is not as fast in this league as he was.
Right.
So when you got guys coming up like McDavid and Drouin and McKinnon and all these younger guys that are all fast, Ennis really isn't, top-tier fast anymore. But he does still have the hands. He has the skill to kind of succeed if he can kind of get his game back, fill in a couple pieces around him. And then, I mean, I'm not expecting big things from him, but I think you can at least get something out of him for what we would need for a guy like Tyler Ennis.
Yeah, I mean, you know me. I've been on the Ennis train last year that he could rebound, and obviously he didn't. I mean, he was a 20-goal guy his whole career, and I thought the concussions maybe knocked him off of that. But, there was times you saw flashes, like you said, where he was that guy who had that speed, who had that skill. Like, oh, there's Tyler Ennis. Look at that nice move he made. But there's other times that you're like, oh, did Tyler Ennis even play tonight? And, maybe he fell into the Bylsma doghouse, and he was one of the guys that, didn't like what Bylsma was doing, like many of the guys in that room. And, that's kind of what hurt him. Maybe the same could be said for a guy like Girgensons, who, Botterill maybe thinks could rebound under Housley. I mean, it's $4.5 million that he's owed the cap hit. In today's NHL, that's not really a lot of money. So, and plus, I mean, you got to field the team. If you're going to move out of Vander Kane and going to lose Carrier, I mean, you got to have wingers here somewhere, So maybe he thinks Tyler Ennis can step up into a bigger role if given that opportunity. We never really saw him play with Eichel last year. Maybe that's a guy I always said he could fit with. So maybe Botterill and Housley want to try that out.
Or maybe they think he can have a good 50 games and move him at the deadline.
Yeah, there's that too. There's absolutely that aspect of it too. And again, I mean, this expansion thing could end and he could be bought out in a week. I mean, it really you don't know. But I think it's at least promising for Ennis and his future here. He likes being here. He's been here a long time. I'm not necessarily opposed to giving him the opportunity to show if he can regain his form. He's only 27 years old. He's too slow like Molson or Delory or guys like that who can't keep up anymore. He has that speed. he has the skill. It's getting to those areas. And I think it's finishing. And, again, I keep coming back to it. He didn't have concussions last year, but he had the groin. Maybe that affected his legs. I would like to get a view of Tyler Ennis, at full health. Maybe an off season of getting ready and getting healthy and committing yourself and being in shape you can get that speed back that we saw. Maybe he can be near, maybe not this fast guy on the ice, but he can be near that high end speed again. It's a lot of ifs, but again, it's having Tyler Ennis around next year is not as depressing as having Matt Molson sticking around for sure. That's for sure.
I'll never disagree with that. But correct me if I'm wrong, though. At the end of last season, Ennis did start taking the puck to the net again.
Yes.
So, maybe it's a good sign of things to come. Maybe you just, concussions are a scary thing, and maybe it takes a little bit to get that confidence to, okay, I'm going to take this and that. If I get rocked, maybe I'll get right back up.
Right.
And maybe, doing that a couple times will give you that confidence again. It seems like he tried it more at the end of the season. We'll see. That's that's as far as I'll go on Tyler Ennis.
Yeah, I hear you. So we mentioned him. I quickly want to touch on Molson and Bogosian. Maybe not Bogosian as much because I think that was more of a long shot that they would take him. But maybe we'll focus on Molson here.
Bogosian's my Tyler Ennis.
Okay.
I kind of want to see him in this offense.
With Housley coaching, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's an offensive guy that was parked in front of the net for a lot of last year and out his game. So we'll see. Again.
Yeah, there's a lot of those Will seats we're talking about here, Bill. It's making me a little nervous.
We don't got to win next season, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Next season is for the Will Seas.
Speaking of more depressing things, Molson, it's maybe becoming more – I'll say this. It's getting closer to reality that he's going to be here again next season. We're getting near the end here in expansion. We could be surprised and he gets picked by Vegas and there's some sort of side deal or he's traded later. But I haven't really heard that unless Botterill's really playing this one close to the chest and he hasn't got out, which is possible.
You haven't heard a lot of anything from Buffalo, to be honest.
Right. You never heard anything about Beaulieu and then, bam, there he is. So that's very possible. But I'll say this at the very least is I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about that being a reality. Those people on Twitter told me that they would trade the Sabres first round pick to get rid of him. I'm not that desperate. I'm not moving 8th overall to dump Matt Molson. Worst case scenario, I'll shove him in the fourth line and hope he can bank me some power play 2 goals again and, or I'll bury him in Rochester. I don't know. I'll figure something out. But I'm certainly not trading 8th overall and I can get a top 10 pick to just dump his salary when there's 2 more years left on it.
No, I'd give up a second, but not a first.
Yep.
I would say any kind of person who's trying to salvage a Matt Molson career, beware.
Yeah.
He scored a lot of those goals in the first unit when there was injuries.
Yes,
he's not scoring any on the second, I don't think. Especially with a guy like Kane gone.
That was a Vander Kane's power play unit. Now it's.
It was. All right, Gianta, Molson, Kane, go.
Yep.
Go shoot 10 times Kane and see if you can score once from the half boards. But, if he goes, I'm assuming there will be other pieces coming in to kind of fill out that second unit. Maybe it's like an NS or Benino or something. But, if I got to see another full season of Matt Molson, at least to what you said, hopefully it's on the fourth line this time and it doesn't creep up into my other top lines. But you hit it on the head. Speed of depressing. I don't know what to do with him anymore. I've kind of beat the dead horse, I guess, if you will, many times over the last year, and I don't know how much more I need to talk about it. I really hope. I think you're right that it's getting to that point where I am starting to get a little nervous, but I'm hanging on. I'm hanging on to the dumbest rumors you can hear about Godfathers and long hair and Vegas and gambling, whatever rumor you want to throw my way, I'll listen to it because at this point I will definitely give up even that Washington third, that second.
Yep.
I'm willing to move either of those to get him off my roster at this point because it's another reason to play him over somebody else who's going to give you more, production or at least more speed or more, that ability to make a big play. And he just doesn't have it anymore.
No.
I mean, if the NHL was playing a game of post, then maybe.
Yeah, he's really good at that. It's unfortunate, because, I guess the thing is this whole time we're going in here thinking like, man, we can really get rid of Matt Molson here. And yeah, sure, we'll just give him a draft pick and yeah, that'll go. And then you're like, oh, wait, teams are giving up first-round draft picks to dump contracts? I don't know if I want to play in that field.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to kind of round off the Sabres part of this expansion talk, I will say this, and I guess this is the last thing again on Carrier, is you're not losing a Vatanen. You're not losing a Dumba. You're not losing a Laterra or somebody like that. So would it hurt to lose Carrier a little bit, but you're not losing a guy like some of these teams are potentially losing. So I think it just goes back to the beginning of the season when we knew expansion was coming. Buffalo's got it pretty easy when it comes to expansion. I guess the thing is that Allmark threw a wrench into it because ideally you thought you were putting Molson, Bogosian, Ennis, and Georges on there and saying, take one.
Good luck, yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't kind of work out that way. But, either way, you're getting out pretty easy. Best case scenario, they're moving a lower pick to get rid of a contract, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
So there are other teams that have submitted expansion lists besides just the Sabres. So that did happen. I think we talked a little bit in the beginning of the podcast here. There's a lot of interesting names out there. So let me run down this list. I'll start with forwards of interesting guys, and we'll talk maybe with some guys that make sense for the Sabres. I'll start with Marchessault, who's extremely interesting that Florida would expose him.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Stahl, James Neal, Ryan Strome, Michael Grabner, Jordan Wheel, Carl Hagelin, Neil Yakupov, Marco Dano, Brock Nelson, Josh Bailey, Yoli Lathera. Those are some guys on the forward side of things. Oh, William Karlsson, too, out of Columbus. Defenseman, Vatanen, Manson, Jason Demers, which is, again, surprising from Florida. McNabb, good friend Braden McNabb. Everyone thought that was the worst trade of all time. Oh, look at that. He's exposed. Matt Dumba, Calvin DeHaan, Hickey, Clendenning, Clayson, Chris Weidman, Schlemko, Schmidt, Tobias, Enstrom, Xavier Oulet. And then if you want it for goaltenders, Mrazek, Luongo, Ranta, Fleury, Grubauer, Arundel. That's really on the goaltending side. Definitely a lot of – If Vegas alone, Linus Homework, yeah. If Vegas alone just didn't do any side deals and just took the guys that are available to them, they could be a really good team next year.
I know.
Right?
Yeah. I just it's pretty wild. I was thinking about that the other day. I was going back and forth with somebody on Twitter, and it kind of hit me that, you got to deal with all these other teams. We also got to make it worth it for Vegas not just to be like, I'm going to keep this guy.
Right.
Especially a guy like Dumba or Vatanen or Manson.
Yeah.
I need the three of them. I mean, if you could even have two of them as your top pair going in, I mean, Vegas could have a better decor than half the NHL. And
yeah.
That's just coming right out of expansion. So, I mean, it's pretty wild. Like you said, if Vegas stood put and kind of just really just picked players, they could have a really good defense, a really good goaltending group, and nobody would ever score. But for the most part.
The thing is, though, you look at all these side deals they're doing, and I'll take the Islanders one, which is the one that was most recently reported prior to us coming on, is Islanders would trade 15 overall to Vegas to have them take Mikhail Grabovski's contract and then basically lay off all the guys, thinking then pick Nikolai Kulemin or something like that. But I don't know, if I'm George McPhee, I don't know, is the 15th overall pick really worth not picking Kelvin DeHaan or Hickey or Josh Bailey or Brock Nelson?
They went 5D too,
right?
Which is crazy,
right? They went 5D and still exposed Hickey and DeHaan. Right?
Yeah,
I don't Is that worth it? Is the guy you're going to get at 15th overall better than those guys are right now?
I mean, that's what he's weighing right now, isn't it? So, I mean, I think he said, 9 o'clock tonight. So an hour ago, he was done making trades.
Well, 9 o'clock Pacific, so midnight our time.
Okay, so he still has 2 hours, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he basically knows exactly what he's doing at this point. I'm thinking that there probably isn't too many others, but I mean, yeah, it's kind of what he's got to look at, and probably what he's been weighing for quite some time now is, 15 overall, but like you said, with with who they're exposing, like, don't I just say thanks, Garth Snow, and kind of take my guy and leave?
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't, I guess, is
Right.
kind of what I'm getting at here. I mean, I guess it comes down to what else you're getting. I mean, if you have 2-3 other first-round picks on top of your 6 overall, that kind of makes your number 15 not as valuable because you can, take 4 other guys in the draft. So if there's 2 or 3 maybe in the first round that you really like, you've got way more than enough ammo to go get those 2 or 3 guys.
Yep.
And just pick other guys that you like off of unprotected lists and be on your way. So yeah, it's it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Kind of what he does, and at least to see the whole scope, kind of of what he was. I don't know. He's board of pins and pictures and everything, and we'll kind of get that picture coming up here in the next couple of days. Hopefully, there's some leaks.
Yeah. I mean, they've been pretty tight-lipped, but the NHL Fun Police made sure there was no fun before the teams came out. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. I have this hard time. If I'm McPhee and I'm seeing this list that I understand when it built through the draft, but I mean, it's not like you're going to get old veterans. I mean, you're Vatanen, who's low 20s, Manson, low 20s, Dumba, DeHaan, Carlson, Hickey, Marchessault, all these guys, Nelson and Bailey. I mean, Tobias Enstrom. There's all guys who are younger, good hockey players, and I don't know. I feel like especially in this year's draft, where I'm sure all the first round picks you're going to get are not going to be this year. There'll be some for 2018, but in this year's draft, I mean, I don't. The Blue Jackets pick at 24. I don't know. Okay, you'll get a guy who's going to be here in 4 years, 3 years. If even at 15, you're going to get a guy who's going to come up in 2 or 3 years. You're not going to. Maybe that's what he wants, but I figure passing up the opportunity to have a guy like Vatanen on your team who can be productive now and then be productive in 4 and 5 years and still be on your team. So, that's the hard part of it all. But I don't know. I guess that's why he's the guy running the show right now, and he's really only one in the league for the next 48 hours here. Actually, the next 3 hours, like you said. So beyond that, it's kind of over. And the crazy thing that we talked about yesterday, we were texting back and forth, is I feel bad for some of these GMs. Like Minnesota could have, I don't know, let's say Buffalo calling him and say, hey, man, Matt Dumba, you pick him for me, I'll give you this. McPhee can call Minnesota and goes, hey, Buffalo said if I pick Minnesota, if I pick Dumba, they'll give me this. Can you, and then you have GMs who are bidding against their own guys like they already – it's crazy. It's a crazy scene.
I mean, unfortunately, there's 2 things on that, and it's it sounds like McPhee is kind of – he said he wants to build through the draft, but he's making it sound like he's taking all these terrible contracts that he can kind of just ride out these terrible contracts for 2-3 years, and then all of a sudden all of his draft picks will be ready. And I mean, I don't know that's the case, so I kind of don't know what he's getting at with that.
Yeah, he's taking Clarkson, who will never play again. He's going to take your boss, who might not play again, concussion issues.
Right, yeah. So guys like that, and then number 2 to this is, I feel like that's kind of why you had a dud at the end of the expansion free period, I guess you could say.
Right.
Is because I think all these teams just made deals with Vegas, and Vegas was willing to make all these deals that they didn't have to ship guys out. So Anaheim, who exposed probably 4 really good guys, can just throw them a first-round pick and say, don't touch any of them.
Right.
If Vegas says yes to that, I mean, Anaheim, they don't get out scot-free, but they get out a lot easier than shipping, Vatanen to somewhere.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that. Anaheim could realistically go in next season with the same defense they had this year when nobody thought that was possible. It's crazy.
Well, that's what I mean, though. It kind of gets to the point of it's going to be really interesting to see what Vegas does here because, yeah, I'm excited about Vegas, and I think I'm more excited about just the idea of Vegas, what they were able to be, what they were able to do this offseason, all the deals that they were able to talk about and kind of ponder. But they could miss. They could miss on a lot here. If you're really taking a first-round pick to say, all right, I'm not going to touch these guys from Anaheim, instead of just taking a Manson or a Vatanen,
Yeah.
I think you're going to look pretty foolish in 2 or 3 years.
I mean, and then the Anaheim pick, that's going to be, 28, 27 next year? I mean, it's not like it's a high first-round pick,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, if all these rumors are true about the first-round picks for literally, like, not touching 3 to 4 guys, I just don't know the values there. So I wonder how McPhee's going to handle that. And I think that's kind of the most interesting thing for me coming up here in the next 2 days is to see where his value lied. Because if he really stuck to this build through the draft mantra, I think his value chart is way off. For at least for what we're seeing with these expansion lists. And maybe it's a detriment to him that these get exposed because – I mean, yeah, it's nice, and you look pretty cool if you got 5 first-round picks. But like you said, if you're not going to see him for 3 years and all these NHL teams walk away with all their guys still intact, I don't know how you're helping yourself too much.
Yeah, I agree. So I'll ask you, is there maybe 1 or 2 guys that you think the Sabres should call here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I tweeted out on BTB almost immediately, Dumba. I mean, I'm calling right away. If I can have Ristolainen, McNabb, and then whatever Bogosian and Dumba as my top 4 pair, that's 2 defensive pairings immediately that every single forward line playing against them has to keep their head up because McCabe is now showing that he can hit. He laid out line A. He was starting to really hit guys, especially there at the end of the season. He's starting to become a lot more physical, and that's all Dumba does, baby. He's just you don't keep your head up across the middle. He is laying you out. So, I mean, if you could have 2 guys that do that on 2 different lines, that makes it really, really hard to play against, especially coming across the middle. If you're not paying attention, you're going to get lit up, and players are going to take notice that Buffalo would be a hard team to play against. So, I mean, for Dumba's sake, I might go a little crazy because obviously you have to fight. Minnesota trying to keep him, Vegas wanting to take him, maybe other teams. But, I mean, I'd be willing to give up, I don't know, Kane, a second, a prospect, maybe a little more to get a guy like Dumba. And if you're able to pull something like that off, you went from one of the worst defenses in the league to not worrying about your defense for the next 5 years.
Because you have a lot of guys who can skate in that defense too. I mean, you had Gooley and Beaulieu and even don't forget about Antipin in that group. I mean, you have a whole lot of guys in that defense you can skate all of a sudden. Yeah,
so I when I see this list, I mean, obviously, yes, the Anaheim guys, but I think Dumba was the surprise, so that's kind of why he jumped off to me. Like, I kind of knew Mason and or Vatanen were going to be unprotected and that they were going to try and swing something to make sure they're not touched. But for Dumba to be out there, I think that was the one that I just look at it and for a team that went into this offseason really struggling and everyone freaking out about the defense, I guess maybe this is the one move that I do wish Murray was still around because that's I got to win next year. I'm going to pull the trigger kind of trade, and that would have been pretty crazy to see.
Yeah, I mean, even beyond him, I mean, there's I like Calvin DeHaan a lot. I think he can be a good guy, and he's probably cheaper than Dumba. Even Hickey's another guy on the Islanders that I think he's better than Hamonic, who might end up getting moved in the day here. So he's another guy that I would look at. And then I think, Tobias Enstrom isn't the same player that he was, but again, he's a puck mover. He's a good skater. So maybe he's a guy you can think about too.
I will say about Enstrom real quick is that he was one of the top Winnipeg prospects until their prospect pool got really deep. Yeah. So I think he still is a really good guy. I think there's just a lot of, good defensemen that have kind of jumped him. Like, and once you get Buffalo and Morrissey's coming up, and he's a really good prospect. Trouba stayed. So, I think it was kind of just a matter of a good prospect being jumped by just better prospects because they had those picks.
So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen here. I mean, it's really a lot more is up in the air than I thought there would be. Now, I'll say that. I keep going back to it. I mean, these lists of players that are available is not at all what I expected a month ago, 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's really crazy the talent that is out there. And, part of me believes I put myself in McPhee's shoes. If I'm McPhee, I'm going, forget these side deals. I'm just going to pick these guys, and
Yeah,
So
I will say this: if we get to 2 days from now and he doesn't have trades with at least a third of the league,
yeah,
I'm going to be pretty upset.
yeah, and there should be some people. I know they just got a hockey team. There should be some people in Vegas who'd be pretty upset too because there's a lot of good talent he's going to be passing on. And then I think where I want to kind of end the whole discussion here is, I guess what I'm looking for is letdown. They said it was going to be the busiest offseason in the NHL history there, Bill. And we got 2 trades before the roster freeze. And if Minnesota and the Islanders and Anaheim gets away with not losing another defenseman, then, well, there goes all that. I guess now we're just at a normal offseason again.
Yeah, I guess I would say it's maybe the busiest offseason for one team.
Yeah, right.
Trade-wise, I could see Vegas making, 10-plus trades to get picks. But, I mean, other than that, yeah, it was kind of a dud there at the right before expansion, the shutdown or freeze or whatever. So, I mean, the Sabres picked up a defenseman at least. He'll be a good fit, especially for the value. Yeah, I mean, other than that, there's a lot of good guys out there. I wonder if – see, the problem is that you can only pick one.
Right.
So I think that's kind of where if I was to go off on a little bit of fantasy land here, I was thinking maybe just asking, like, if you give up a second, who would you try and get? Like, with that, I'm thinking about, like, all the Blues guys that were, available.
Yeah.
But, again, at the same time, you got to remember Vegas needs to ice the team too. So there's a lot of good guys that can only pick one, and they got to put a team on the ice as well. So they can't do too much of that.
Yeah, I mean, Nate Schmidt's another guy I saw at the bottom of my list that was on the next page I missed. I mean, he's another interesting guy to Washington that, I mean, the kid can fly, and he has an offensive flair. I mean, we saw a little bit of that against Pittsburgh when they finally inserted him into the lineup, and against Ottawa, too, when they inserted him in. So he's another guy that, if I'm McPhee and I'm looking at Schmidt or Grubauer, I mean, that's a kind of a Carrier situation we're seeing there in Washington. They're like, all right, don't touch Grubauer, which I think is crazy because you have Holtby, but whatever. And maybe they say take Nate Schmidt instead, which, again, it's crazy. You're going to lose Alzner. But
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever. That's
yeah,
exactly. You can go get another one anywhere. You can go get another one somewhere else. You have Braden Holtby, who's a really good goaltender. Why are you that worried about your backup goaltender?
I agree. Yeah, I don't know.
Some GMs
I think
in this league,
Yeah, like I was gonna say, I think it's just a lot of teams kind of got not excited, but
panic a little bit, maybe.
Over worried. Yeah,
Yep.
Over worried is what I was looking for. Is just that they're like, oh my god, I can't lose this guy, so here's a first or a second.
Yeah.
And Vegas is just like, really? All right.
Yeah. Or here, just take this guy instead of taking this guy. And they're like, are you sure? And I'll just take him. And then, like, at the end of the day, you're like, well, actually, maybe that wasn't the best idea because.
Right. Yeah. I think you'll see a little bit on both ends. I think you'll see Vegas make some good moves where the team, you're going to be wondering what they were doing. And then on the other end, Vegas probably could have done a little more or done a little less and taken a little more.
Yeah.
And made out a little bit better than they will in a couple days here.
So I think that kind of puts a wrap on episode 51 here. Covered the expansion not only for the Sabres, for the entire NHL. We talked with Nick Guido, so thank you to Nick for coming on again and giving us an insight on new Sabres defenseman Nathan Beaulieu and kind of try to give us an insight exactly what's going on in Montreal.